Remember our writer of Acts, Luke the doctor, he's been giving us a travel log of the travels of the disciples as they carry out this commission to the ends of the earth. And so we've been looking at this story of Saul, his conversion and the whole thing. But now Luke gives us a meanwhile. So we're going to leave the story of Saul, and remember he escaped out of Jerusalem, went down to his old hometown to hide out in Tarsus, and he's going to be there for a few years. We'll pick him up in chapter 11, God willing. But meanwhile, says Luke, meanwhile, what happened to Peter? Remember, Peter was involved with the great revival at the Samaritan Pentecost, as we call it. And what happened to him? Well, meanwhile, that's where we pick it up in Acts 9, verse 32, as Peter travelled about the country. So Peter's back in the action. He went to visit the saints at Lydda. So he went to visit the saints. Did he go down to the St Kilda Footy Club and hang out with the saints? Or, what does it mean when it says saints? Is it those super Christians? Is it the people who have reached that pinnacle of sainthood? What is a saint? Well, if we put this verse together with the other references to saints in the scriptures, we find that saints are not super Christians. We see that the Apostle Paul, when he's writing his letters to the church in Ephesus, to the church at Rome, or 2 Corinthians, and so on, he addresses all the beloved saints. He addresses to the church at Ephesus, the saints there, everyone. In other words, all Christians. So saints are not some super Christians, contrary to what others might say, our friends in the Roman Church or the Orthodox Church. Rather, the way Paul addresses it, saints simply means believers. So there's no two tiers of Christianity, the super Christians and the rest of us. All are saints. So if you're a believer this morning, you're a saint. Now, before you get too big ahead here, we have to qualify what exactly it means to be a saint. I believe you're saints. If you're a believer, you're a saint. Might not be looking like saints from this angle, but nevertheless, you're saints. You're saints. How are you a saint? Well, you're a saint not because of who you are, what you've done, but rather because of the one you've believed in and what he's done at the cross of Christ to take away your sin so that in God's sight you are holy and blameless in his sight. Why? Because in his perfect justice your sin has been accounted for, paid for. And so you're cleansed. Saint means holy or separate, set apart for God. So you've been called by God, you've been cleansed by God, but of course a saint also has a calling because of that term holy, set apart, separate from sin. So a saint is someone who is a saint because of what Jesus did, but will also seek to live out, failingly as we do, will seek to live out a life separate from sin, in walking in holiness as God enables us. Well, Peter arrives here in Lydda. Lydda is about 42 k's northwest of Jerusalem, and he's visiting the saints. He's visiting the saints. They're the everyday believers. They're the everyday believers who have probably, remember this is the beginning of the church. It began in Jerusalem. So how did they get out there to Lydda? Well, remember what happened when the disciple Stephen was executed. He was stoned to death. And what happened when he was stoned to death? Remember, we'll just recap back in Acts chapter 8, verse 1. On that day, that's the day that Stephen was executed, On that day, a great persecution broke out against the church at Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. Where were they scattered? So the persecution breaks out, and the people are all running for their lives. Well, one of the places, no doubt, included Lydda in our text, where they're found believers. How did they get there? Well, they would have been those running out of Jerusalem for their safety and settled there. And that's where Peter's visiting. So we continue in verse 33. Then he, that's Peter, found a man named Aeneas, a paralytic who had been bedridden for 8 years. Aeneas, Peter said to him, Jesus Christ heals you. Get up and take care of your mat. Immediately Aeneas got up. All those who lived in Lydda and Sharon saw him and turned to the Lord. So there's a great saving works going on. But the significant thing here is that Lydda is actually a Gentile area, and we've got these people spreading the news and so on. Well, what are we seeing? Nothing less than the beginning of Jesus' Great Commission. You're to take this message. You're to be my witnesses in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth implying Gentiles, the whole world, right? And so we're seeing a beginning of it. The beginning of this mission, at least a foretaste, with people being converted in Lydda in a Gentile area. There's something about the two miracles in this section up to the end of the chapter that actually connects the ministry of the apostles with the ministry of Jesus. Remember, the apostles were specially chosen and given these powers, and we're seeing right before in our text the clearly it's Jesus who's doing the miracles, because Peter says in verse 34, Jesus Christ heals you. But did you notice the similarity? Jesus has gone on to heaven, but he's still continuing his ministry from heaven. And we can easily recall similar miracles that Jesus did on earth in his ministry, similar to the apostles. Remember in Mark chapter 2, verse 10, it was Jesus who said to the paralytic, same thing that Peter just healed a paralytic man here. I tell you, get up and take your mat and go home. He took up his mat and walked out in full view of the mat. The same thing that's just happened with Peter. The guy takes up his mat, and in front of all of them, this amazed everyone and so on. And the similarity doesn't end there. By the time, God willing, we do get to the end of this chapter, because we'll see another similarity when we get to Peter's second miracle. But we continue on here in verse 36. In Joppa, there was a disciple named Tabitha, which when translated as Dorcas, who was also doing good and helping the poor. About that time she became sick and died, and her body was washed and placed in an upstairs room. Lydda was near Joppa. So when the disciples heard that Peter was in Lydda, they sent 2 men to him and urged him, please come at once. So Lydda's near Joppa, which is modern-day Jaffa, is actually today part of Tel Aviv. And it's about 18 k's northwest of Lydda. So for them to call Peter, it's a decent walk. It's about a 4-hour walk to get to where they are. So they call Peter. What were they actually hoping Peter was going to do? Raise the dead? Peter hadn't been doing a lot of that lately. Hadn't been doing any of it. Maybe just in their grief, they're wanting him to be there and hoping he could at least come and comfort them. Because even for people who believe in miracles, usually it's accepted when someone's dead, they're dead. That's not the time to pray for healing. But their grief, and they're calling out to Peter. Can't anything be done? Tabitha is dead. And she must have been someone who had affected the whole community in such a way, the grief is sent right throughout the community. Have a look at verse 36 again. In Joppa there was a disciple named Tabitha, which when translated as Dorcas, who was always doing good. and helping the poor. And it seems that particularly the poor that she helped were widows. Now, widows in the ancient world had no means to support it. They didn't have family caring for them. They had no means to support. There was no widow's pension, and it wasn't. They didn't have any other way to survive. So, what these widows are doing here at the death of this beloved Tabitha is showing everybody the clothes that she made for them. I wouldn't have the clothes on my back if it wasn't for Tabitha, and now she's dead. She's gone. We loved her. Well, verse 39, Peter went with them to go to Tabitha, and when he arrived, he was taken upstairs to the room. All the widows, notice that? It wasn't just a few people she'd affected. She had such a great effect that Luke can record that it was all the widows stood around him, crying and showing him the robes and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was still with them. Tabitha's died. And what we're seeing in this text, this scene, is actually a funeral. What it's like in the ancient world when you lose someone you love. And nothing's changed in 2,000 years. I attended a funeral last week, and it's exactly the same. Lots of people crying, grieving at the loss, talking about what the person meant to them. And of course, at funerals, everyone is a saint. You know, they always say good things, don't they? When Kerry Packer, Australia's first billionaire, passed away at his funeral, people are saying nice things about him. He may well have been a nice bloke. I'm not doubting that. It was interesting how they played up certain things, even had him up there smiling down upon us even though he didn't believe anything. Now, there's no such thing, but I think it was Alan Jones said, Kerry didn't believe in heaven, but whether he likes it or not, he's there now. Saying all these wonderful things about him. He was, for instance, commended for his great acts of charity. That he was a very charitable man, even though he's very rich, he was very charitable. And they said this little known fact that Kerry Packer used to give away $1.6 million per year to charity. Now, it's his money to give or not to give. He's not obligated to give anything, so that's good. He gave away $1.6 million per year. Of course, an even more well-known fact was the fact that he would go into a casino and blow $20 million on one night and then $30 million on another night. He had the money to do it. It's his to give or not. But it's just interesting the way they played up this charitable, such a charitable man. Well, at the funeral, you can tell when people have had a real effect on you and when others are not just talking hype to hype them up. There's something authentic about the mourning here for Tabitha. The widows crying out, all the widows, we're told, crying out in anguish and sorrow and saying, here, look at the evidence of the love this woman had for us. Their clothes, their very clothes on their back were given to and made, which is no small thing in the ancient world. Do you know how long it would have taken her to make these clothes? As verse 39 says, all the widows. So their tears and loss of Tabitha is genuine great grief at how much she was loved. They weep. She's dead. And death is such a crushing blow, and it can bring and be a time of regrets. A lot of regrets at funerals. probably been to more funerals than all of you, and there are a lot of regrets. I wish I had have told them, I love you. I wish I had have told them, I'm sorry, forgive me. I took a funeral when I was in Frankston, a guy who lived on our street. It wasn't an old man. He was dying. He was 54. He died, and his brother was inconsolable at the funeral. And he was like a together successful guy who had his life all together supposedly. And I caught up with his sister a year later. She said he's still inconsolable because of regrets, things he wished he'd said to his brother. So if nothing else, don't leave it till people are dead before you say what you need to say to people. After people die, it's too late. There was still unfinished business for that guy. Well, it's all too late at this funeral. Tabitha, you touched our lives. Maybe some of them are wishing they could have said some more to her before she passed, but we're just weeping and nothing can be done. And I have a kind of a love-hate thing with funerals. Funerals, on one hand, you really grieve with those who are grieving, and it's such a sad time. And yet, it's also one of the very few times, if the only time for many people, when we really have to stop and think. What did our Ecclesiastes writer say? Better to be in a house of mourning. For the dead, it's time. For the living, it's time to think in a way that you do not think. Life goes on. You get on with your life. You're not thinking about the big picture. But at a funeral, all of a sudden, everything, you start questioning the very meaning of life. Even the unbelievers are at least stopping and thinking, hang on, what is really the meaning of life? This loved one I've lost. Now, I start to question, what's important? Who do I love? Who loves me? Who's still here? And some unbelievers start to think, and what happens next after you die? Where do you go? It's only at that funeral. It's only a short time. And it's a reality that kind of hits us just for that moment. And then straight after that, we're back in the world. We've forgotten all about that until we're back in another funeral. Not even thinking that one of these times it's going to be me that's dead. And it won't be necessarily the oldest of us. It won't be. One of these times it'll be you, the people are mourning and making up a whole lot of nonsense about what a good person you were. And it won't be necessarily the youngest of us. One of our members at Frankston tried to tell her grandson, who's 25 years old, about the things of God. And he said, Granny, I'm too young. Look, I got plenty of time to think about that. I'm spiritual. I don't need to think about all that, And rejected all that. 2 weeks later, he was driving home from work, exit ramp of the freeway, and some crazy person drove up the wrong way out the exit ramp, hit him head on and killed him. And there we were at his funeral, and the joint was packed. There must have been 300 people at that funeral at least, and the crying, the inconsolable tears. How could this happen? Someone so young. Well, it happens all the time to young people as well as old. Even the most worldly people lays aside, like here we are with mourning Tabitha, a time when you really start to think about what life's all about. And even the most worldly person will lay aside those worldly things and think about the big picture of life. At that moment, they'll think, at least until the will is being read out, and then we're back into the world again, What's the saying? Where there's a will, there's a relative, But at the funeral, at least at this moment, even the atheist deserts their faith and they start believing. They may not go as far as believing in God, but they at least believe in heaven. Haven't you noticed that? Every single funeral, they're up there smiling down upon us. Right? They're in heaven, smiling down. Great. Where did you get that idea from? Well, they believe that. They believe that. It's as though, as the scripture says in Ecclesiastes, eternity is written on our hearts. The unbeliever usually ignores and suppresses the reality of death until the funeral, then they're believing. They're up there, if it's a famous rock star or something, they're up there playing in heaven, or the athletes up there playing kick the kick, whatever it is, right? They're up there smiling down upon us. But at the end of the day, it's really just a vague hope. And that's inspired my writing of my little book, Heaven, Where Did You Get That Idea? Because, have you noticed, everybody believes in heaven at the funeral. I don't seem to believe in hell as much, but they certainly believe in heaven. They're up there smiling down upon us. And the question that I want to raise, and an appropriate time you should raise, is where did you get that idea from? That there's a heaven, there's someone up there smiling down. Oh, well, doesn't everybody believe it? Don't all the religions believe in heaven? No, they don't. Eastern religions do not believe in heaven. There's a personal ongoing existence, like someone up there smiling down upon it. In Buddhism, what is the goal? It's nirvana, to be enlightened, to reach nirvana. What is nirvana? It means extinction. Extinction particularly of the self. That is, you're no longer you, you're no happy chappy smiling down upon us. Removal of the self. In Hinduism, what's the goal? It's to be one with Brahman, like as it's often said, a drop of water into the ocean. The removal of you. No happy chappy smiling down from heaven. No, they don't believe that. I don't know why these people are trying to push all these Buddhists and Hindus where they don't want to go. They don't believe in heaven as we understand a personal, ongoing existence. Islam believes in heaven. Where did Islam get the idea of heaven? Well, Islam claims to be a follow-on from the Bible. So Islam would claim, by definition, that it's the idea of heaven comes from the Bible. They might have changed it around a bit, but nevertheless, the concept comes from the Bible. And when you read the Bible, the idea of heaven is fully developed in the teaching of Jesus. So when you cut through all of these different concepts and ideas and philosophies and religions and everything, when you really come down, when you talk about someone up there smiling down, you're saying you got the idea from Jesus. So does that mean all the people who say, they're up there smiling down, you're suddenly believing in Jesus now? No, not believing in Jesus. But Jesus is the one that you actually got the idea of heaven from. So wouldn't it be a good idea to check with the owner of the joint before you presume you got your room booked? Right? Because you got the idea from Jesus. But the unbeliever wants Jesus' heaven, but they don't want Jesus himself. Because the one who gave us the idea of heaven is also the one who told us about hell, a place of justice that most people will choose to go to because they would rather go on their own than have a saviour. The same one who told us about heaven told us how to get there, told us there was only a few who would find it, and that the way to get there was through Jesus taking your place in the punishment at the cross to take away your sin, because heaven's a place where no sin can enter, to give you that gift through repentance and faith in Him, not yourself. Well, people at the funeral, they're clinging on to this. Well, I hope they're up there smiling down upon us. But because it's only a borrowed hope, it doesn't really console them. It's sort of like a vague kind of thing. Doesn't really comfort them because they don't even know where they got the idea from. And it really has no relevance to their lives. It's pie in the sky when you die, by and by. That's, In reality, we're here crying for Tabitha. She's dead. She meant so much to us. We can't have her back. That's it. It's gone. Nothing but crying. Because if you take unbelief to its logical conclusion, if we really are, as most believe today, we just popped out of nothing and, we just evolved into this thing. There's no meaning behind it, no purpose behind it. So you live for a while, the survival of the fittest finally works and you die. What's the meaning in between? So what someone dies, you had a bit of happiness with someone for a while, now they're gone. What difference does it make? What's the point? There is no meaning. Why are people so deeply moved when loved ones die, as though eternity is written on our hearts? The reality hits when Tabitha's gone, and we think, what a waste. Why do we say that? What a waste. If there's no meaning to life, unless there is some hope. But they're looking now at the way Tabitha touched their lives, and this is the time when people start to think, well, if you knew it was coming, you might think you wouldn't wait for a funeral. People have been in this world right now. I know they've been told, they have a terminal illness and they're told they've only got this short time. You're going to be dead within 3 months or something. They have an advantage over us, don't they? They're like at the funeral. They got that funeral moment and they're holding onto that every day. Their heightened sensitivity. I'm going to be dying. Where am I going? I'm going to have to face God. How am I living? How am I thinking? How am I speaking to people? All those sorts of things. Because they've got that heightened sense. They've got like an ongoing funeral situation. Well, I've got some bad news. You've all got a terminal illness. Every one of you. It's called death. And you're all going to meet it. It could be sooner or it could be later. But that's just a reality. How are you going to go when you face God? That's just the reality. This whole thing of death. And one day some of us will be at your funeral. Won't necessarily be the oldest among us, but we'll gather. You're there in the coffin. There'll be people crying like at Tabitha's funeral. Crying. The question is, where are you at that time? Where are you? Oh, your body is in the box, in the coffin. But where are you in your soul? Where are you? Did you have it right with God? Yes, I believed. The demons believe and tremble. Does that belief affect your life? Did it make you say no to the things of the world? Oh, I'm not asking if you did it perfectly or if you fell over. Did you get back up again? Did you confess your sin? What I'm asking is not whether you're perfect or whether you've looked like a good Christian, but are you a saint? Are you a saint? That is, someone who's been cleansed as holy by Jesus' torture in your place for your sin, and through his resurrection given you new life, and that you are repentant. That is, you're a saint who has a calling to be separate from sin, to be going in the direction of God and falling over a long way, relying totally on the cross of Christ to take away your sin, but continually confessing and walking with him because you have a terminal illness and you are going to face God, and you're living in light of the one who died in my place and looking forward. What did the scriptures say? Blessed is the one whose heart is set on pilgrimage. I'm not clinging too close to the hopes of this world because I'm going to face God, and I live in light by faith before the judgment seat of Christ because I'm a saint. I've been called by God. That's been given to me, this holiness by God through his Son, but he's calling me to live it out. And I look at everything through the light of how will this that I'm about to do look on the day of judgment when I face Christ? How will this look when people are mourning at my funeral, like Tabitha? And Tabitha, well, that's it for her. She's dead. That's it. Isn't it? Well, we have to come back next week to find out what happens.